President Zelenskyy of Ukraine strikes back with a vengeance against Donald Trump, the Trump regime, and Putin, who are in cahoots with each other. You have Zelenskyy rallying world leaders with the coalition of the willing from Europe to Canada and Australia, bringing them all together virtually in a room to respond to the fact that the United States has, in essence, partnered with Putin to try to orchestrate the surrender of Ukraine. Now, you will recall that about 7 days ago, we were reporting first on the MeidasTouch network before anybody else was really talking about the ambush that Donald Trump and Witkoff tried to pull on Zelenskyy. We reported on the MeidasTouch network. You see right there, I'm bringing out the receipts. 7 days ago, Zelenskyy checkmates Trump as ambush by Donald Trump backfires. And I talked about how there was a meeting that was supposed to take place last weekend in Turkey before Erdogan in Istanbul, and Zelenskyy showed up, but Witkoff didn't show up because Zelenskyy in Europe found out what Witkoff was doing. We speculated that it was probably conspiring with the Russians, with Putin, and we were right. By now, you've seen Bloomberg release the transcript of that phone call on October 14th between Witkoff, between Yuri Yushakov, and Kirill Dmitriev, those two top Russian agents, and Witkoff, who may as well be a Russian agent. And you had Witkoff feeding the Russians information about when Zelenskyy was going to be meeting with Trump in October so that Putin could then make a phone call to Donald Trump and basically undermine the meeting with Zelenskyy. You then had Witkoff, who's Donald Trump's envoy to Russia, giving the Russians advice and guidance on the best way to work with Donald Trump. And then we saw in the messages from the transcript that we've all seen now, right? We've reported on in other videos that Bloomberg got their hands on from this call between Yushakov, Dmitriev, and Witkoff, the 28-point plan of surrender that was presented as the United States plan was handed from the Russians to Witkoff and Kushner, and then to Trump. And Trump said, "This is my plan." But Zelenskyy said, "Not today, Donald." And Zelenskyy worked with his European allies and the coalition of the willing, and they fought back, and they made it clear there will be no dictating which organizations Ukraine can join. If Ukraine wants to join NATO, Ukraine will be able to do it in consultation with NATO, not in part of some surrender. You had Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, who sometimes appears a bit too obsequious to Donald Trump lately. He said Russia has no veto over Kyiv's bid to join the NATO alliance. Let's be clear about that. You have the German Defense Minister, Boris Pistorius, warning in the Bundestag that any forced capitulation of Ukraine would only strengthen Putin and encourage other autocrats. He outlined three main principles for peace: no unilateral territorial concessions, a strong Ukrainian army backed by real security guarantees, and the full involvement of allies in NATO and EU decisions. Peace through capitulation would be a betrayal and a blueprint for future aggression. And that statement was directed right at the faces of the treasonous and traitorous Trump regime, who talks about peace through strength. And the Germans are saying, what you're doing is peace through capitulation. You also had Pistorius saying the following: "We don't know which alliances we can still rely on." He goes on to say, "The geopolitical chessboard is changing rapidly. Its patterns, its arrangements. Alliances are shifting faster than would have been conceivable before. As Germans in the EU and in NATO, this means that we must redefine our position on this geopolitical chessboard, redefine our role in the coming years, because we don't know which alliances we can still rely on in the future and how long they will last." And what he's saying there is the United States, bye-bye. Europe, yes. United States, no. And then we heard from Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor of Germany. He goes, Europe is not a toy, but a sovereign actor with its own interest and values. European affairs must be decided with Europe's consent. An agreement imposed by major powers without the consent of Ukraine or Europe cannot create lasting peace. He goes on to say, in 2026 budget, Germany increased expenses for support of Ukraine by 3 billion euros. Now the total is 11.5 billion euros. 170 billion euros are being prepared for the help with the infrastructure in order to help Ukrainian winter supply after Russian terror. We will support Ukrainians for as long as necessary and will make frozen Russian assets available for that. Putin must understand that he'll not win this war at the expense of European order of freedom and peace. Zelenskyy rallying Europe, and that's what we see. Let me show you the speech where Zelenskyy rallied Europe. You see the photos here of all those world leaders who were joining this. And here we have Zelenskyy giving this speech. Here's what he says. Russia's war against Ukraine hasn't ended yet. Every day, Russia kills our people on the front lines and attacks our cities and energy infrastructure. So while diplomatic efforts to end this war continue, it is crucial that our partners don't forget that Ukraine still needs sufficient defense support, security support, and support for our resilience every single day. And I'm grateful that all members of our coalition of willing understand this and are ready to continue helping our army, our people, and our resilience. It is important that we keep rallying support for both defense and diplomacy. Today's conversation with 40 members of the coalition confirms this. Thank you all. And I want you to see how Europe, how Canada, how Australia, and others are rallying right now. Japan, other rallying behind Ukraine as the United States has been exposed as a Putin bootlicker. So embarrassing to admit that, but let's hear from Zelenskyy right here. Let's play this clip.
Thank you so much, dear friends, Emmanuel, Kira, Friedrich, Marco, Mr. Secretary, and Antonio, Ursula, and all, of course, all the leaders of the coalition. Truly appreciate that you all stand with us, with Ukraine, and that we are working together for our shared security. Right now, when it comes to security, there is nothing to divide between us, and there are no separate issues. Everything affects all of us, and everyone needs to be fully informed. We firmly believe security decisions about Ukraine must include Ukraine. That was our position in Geneva, and always security decisions about Europe must include Europe, and the same applies to Canada, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, other countries, and every nation. And this is simply fair, and it actually works, because when something is decided behind the back of the country or its people, there is always a high risk that it simply will not work. And we all believe that people should decide their own future, and this is in particular what sets us apart from regimes like the one in Moscow. So thank you all for moving forward together and staying coordinated and united. Friends, now we have a good result from Geneva, and from the meetings and talks that took place there, Ukraine has the framework developed by our teams in Geneva. That framework is on the table, and we are ready to move forward together with the United States of America, with personal engagement of President Trump, and with Europe, with leaders, and with all partners who have their strengths and capacity to help. And I'm ready to meet with President Trump, and there are sensitive points to discuss. We have them still, and we think that the presence of European leaders could be helpful. And let's discuss some key issues today in a closed format. But we must also not lose sight of reality. Russia's war against us is not in the past. It's happening every single day. Every day Russia takes Ukrainian lives. Just last night, thanks for warm words and the words of support from you, friends. So last night, there was yet another massive attack on our country, so we cannot relax or forget that Ukraine still needs defense support, security support, support of our resilience every day. And as long as Russia has not taken real steps toward demobilization, real steps to shut down its war machine, steps that would clearly show that Russia is serious about ending this war of aggression. We do not have the right to stop working to support Ukraine, to support our people, and to support our collective security. And we do not have the right to demobilize ourselves. We must protect lives, strengthen air defense, and hold the front line, keep sanctions against Russia, finally channel frozen Russian assets to bolster Ukraine protection, and work out finally the doable framework for the deployment of the reassurance force Ukraine of the coalition of the willing by signing of a relevant memorandum of understanding. Please let us keep working at 100% for security as we have before. And thanks so much.
Now, I want to share this with you as well. This right here is from Ukraine's former Foreign Minister, Dmytro Kuleba. Here's how he describes the 28-point plan being quite literally laundered from Russia to Witkoff to Trump to try to force a surrender of Zelenskyy, but Zelenskyy and Europe was not a having it. Here, play this clip.
The real compromising part of this conversation is where Stephen Witkoff suggests to Yuri Ushakov that Putin calls Trump because Zelenskyy is coming to Washington. So we should have no illusions. Of course, the Russian intelligence was aware that Zelenskyy was coming. And in a different world of diplomacy, it would have been Russia who had to initiate a call between Putin and Trump. But they are lucky because they have Stephen Witkoff on the other side, who actually comes up with his own idea, with exactly the same proposal, in order to effectively make an impact on the way the meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy would go. So for me, from the diplomatic experience perspective, this episode just reaffirms how strongly Mr. Witkoff is trying to help Russia in the effort to end the war and influence the flow of events inside Trump's team.
And it's clearly happening. I don't know what you make, because clearly over this weekend, when all of this bust into the open, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, flew to Geneva to try to, rescue some semblance of an acceptable peace deal. But here's another leak from a separate call, Mr. Kuleba, between Yuri Ushakov, who we were talking about, and Kirill Dmitriev, another very close Putin ally who's also apparently very close to Witkoff. This is Ushakov. Well, we need the maximum, don't you think? What do you think? Otherwise, what's the point of passing anything on? Dmitriev, no, look, I think we'll just make this paper from our position and I'll informally pass it along, making it clear that it's all informal. And I'll let them do like their own. But I don't think they'll take exactly our version, but at least it'll be as close to it as possible. So basically, they're saying that, well, what do you make of that?
That 28-point plan is a list of Russian ultimatums blended with American ideas on how to make these ultimatums look better than they actually are. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a revelation to anyone that just copy-pasting Russian ultimatums as it was done once again clearly tells you where all this comes from. If it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's probably a duck.
Right.
So if it looks like a Russian ultimatum, then probably it comes from Russia.
And finally, I want to share this with you from Gary Kasparov right here. I'm sure you've seen Gary Kasparov's work. Chess champion, as someone who's been outspoken against Russia. Take 2 minutes and watch this excellent rip by Kasparov, as Jay in Kyiv writes. Play the clip.
I'm getting desperate. Mm-hmm. This is the best, show Putin can hope for. Not a single straight answer. It's not about how many weapons you have, ammunition. It's, are you willing to fight and die? Oh, it's nice. You have a Canadian-led brigade in Latvia. What's the order for this brigade? Will they shoot if Russians cross the border? We know the answer. It will take ages to negotiate. I still didn't hear a clear response to, it's not, I can't even imagine this. How can we discuss seriously the deal made by Trump's business partner? It's a real estate deal to enrich Trump's family and sell Ukraine. And how can we seriously discuss that Ukraine will have to give up fortifications that are saving Europe? We're celebrating NATO. NATO is not strong. NATO doesn't exist. It's a fake. It's NATO, 4 letters. The reason you are still sitting here and celebrating it, Ukraine is dying every minute. It's a massive sacrifice. If not for Ukraine standing in front of Russia, Russian tanks would be already in Poland. You all suggested that Ukraine would give up. You offered Zelenskyy a right. And he said, I don't need right ammunition. 4 years Ukraine is fighting for the whole Europe. NATO was built to fight only one war, not to go to Afghanistan, not to go to Syria, one war to save free Europe from Russian aggression. Ukraine is the only country that is fighting this war, and we're still discussing, should we include them or not? Ukraine is the only country that is fulfilling NATO's destiny. And we owe them everything. Oh, let's sacrifice them. Zelenskyy is making, I don't know even how to explain this choice. As a Russian, I also feel guilty. That's why I cannot tell him, show Trump middle finger. But okay, we have how many senators we have here? Are you going to tell Donald Trump that he cannot do that? You have 85 is more than 2/3, yes? If I'm out of 100.
Senator?
So, yes, how come that, this bill is still sitting somewhere on the floor of the Senate, and it's not still being done? Putin, Xi Jinping, all others, they are celebrating it. And by the way, Russia has North Korean, they have Cubans, they have Africans.
There you have it, folks. Peace through strength, not peace through capitulation. Trump exposed himself for his utter weakness. Zelenskyy strikes back, exposes the Trump regime. Europe is saying, what the hell is going on here? And again, you remember some of those headlines that Trump tried to push, knowing that he was likely going to be exposed by Bloomberg for what he and Witkoff were doing with Russia? Ukraine agrees to a deal. Ukraine's in agreement with the deal. They didn't. Russia wants to have full capitulation. You're just making things up. And I've said it before, and let me repeat it again. Media, stop repeating every damn time Trump says there's a deal. He lies. He's a lifelong con artist. He lies about everything. He's a sexual abuser. He's a felon. He's a fraud, okay? That's all he does is fraud. Stop listening to his damn lies. Until we see a document with Russia signing and Ukraine signing and them agreeing, there's no freaking deal. By the way, it's like, I don't know if you know the backstory between the U.S. meeting with Saudi Arabia and MBS. It was a bad meeting, a really bad meeting. Donald Trump gave up F-35s, Blackwell chips, and Saudi Arabia gave nothing. Trump wanted to give that so Saudi Arabia would agree to sign the Abraham Accords and have a peace deal with Israel. MBS said, I ain't doing that. So the U.S. gave our most prized semiconductor chips and our F-35s, I guess simply for Donald Trump to do a personal business deal with Trump's family that's being enriched by the private investment fund, the PIF of Saudi Arabia, and the DAR, which is a subsidiary which does the real estate stuff. But the American people got absolutely screwed. MBS is like, we ain't recognizing Israel. You think the people of Saudi Arabia will be okay with us doing a peace deal with Israel right now? Think again. And Trump's like, please, please. And MBS is like, nah, we're not doing that, okay? We report here things that you need to, that are not getting enough attention nationwide. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers. Thanks for watching.
New Meidas merch. Head to store.MeidasTouch.com today and get yourself the best pro-democracy gear and show your support. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.